I still remember the moment my entire life changed for the second time. 2 years after burying my wife Amanda, I stood frozen in Seattle airport, staring at her ghost. But this was no ghost. She was flesh and blood alive and terrified to see me. My mind struggled to process this impossibility. The wife I had mourned, the woman whose ashes I scattered, was walking among the living. And worse, as I would discover, my own family had orchestrated her resurrection, her escape from me. Before I tell you how my entire world shattered twice, tell me where you are watching from in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories of family betrayal that will make your trust issues seem normal. I met Amanda during our second year at Stanford. I was studying computer engineering while she was pursuing a dual degree in psychology and business. The first time I saw her in the university coffee shop, she was intensely focused on her laptop, dark hair falling across her face as she typed. I remember thinking she looked like someone who knew exactly where she was heading in life. Our connection was immediate and powerful. We shared the same drive, the same ambition, the same dark sense of humor. Within 6 months, we were practically inseparable. By graduation, we had already mapped out our future together. We would move to Boston. I would launch my tech startup focusing on cybersecurity, and she would work in corporate psychology until we were stable enough for her to start her own practice. Marriage came naturally after 2 years of dating. The ceremony was small but elegant, just family and close friends on a vineyard outside of San Francisco. I can still picture her in that simple white dress, looking at me with what I thought was absolute love and trust. My parents adored her from the beginning. My mother would often say Amanda was the daughter she never had, despite having my sister Julia. My father, normally reserved with his affection, would light up whenever Amanda entered the room. The first 3 years of marriage were everything I had imagined. My company, SecurePort, took off faster than anticipated after we secured major venture capital funding. Amanda thrived in her corporate role, quickly becoming a sought-after consultant for executive psychology. We bought a beautiful brownstone in Boston, traveled whenever we could, and began discussing starting a family. That is when the first cracks began to appear, though I did not recognize them as such at the time. After a year of trying, Amanda was not getting pregnant. The fertility specialists found nothing wrong with either of us, attributing it to stress and timing. I threw myself even harder into work, often staying at the office until midnight, sometimes not coming home at all. I told myself I was building our future, securing our family legacy. Amanda grew quieter, more withdrawn. Looking back, I can see how my ambition was already reshaping our relationship. I had specific ideas about our life trajectory, and became frustrated when reality deviated from my vision. When Amanda suggested taking a break from fertility treatments to reduce her stress, I dismissed her concerns. When she talked about feeling isolated in Boston, away from her friends in California, I reminded her of all we had achieved. I handled our finances, made most major decisions, and slowly, without realizing it, began controlling more aspects of our life together. Then came that rainy Tuesday in March 2 years ago. The police officer at my door, removing his hat. The words that collapsed my world. Amanda, driving along the coastal highway during a business trip to Maine, had apparently lost control on the wet roads. Her car had gone over the cliff, caught fire on impact. By the time emergency services reached her, there was little left to recover. The funeral was closed casket due to the severe burns. I remember standing numbly beside it, unable to comprehend that my wife was inside. My parents flanked me, my mother weeping openly, my father stoic, but with red-rimmed eyes. My sister Julia, who had been particularly close to Amanda, was inconsolable. I delivered a eulogy that people later told me was beautiful, though I have no memory of what I said. The weeks after the funeral passed in a blur of paperwork, condolences, and increasing isolation. I took leave from work, barely left our house. My family checked on me daily, bringing food I did not eat, offering comfort I could not accept. My sister Julia moved temporarily into our guest room, claiming she needed the support too, but I knew she was watching over me. There were oddities about the accident that occasionally penetrated my grief. The lack of Amanda's personal effects recovered from the scene. The surprisingly quick processing of her death certificate. The insurance company that paid out with minimal investigation. But these thoughts would fade as waves of grief crashed over me again. Therapy became my lifeline. Dr. Winters, a grief specialist, recommended by my sister, guided me through the stages of loss. Support groups introduced me to others navigating similar pain. Slowly, over months, I began functioning again. I returned to work finding solace in the familiar problems of algorithms and security protocols. By the one-year anniversary of Amanda's death, I had established a new normal. I maintained her side of the closet untouched, kept her favorite flowers fresh on the kitchen table she had loved, but I was surviving. My parents and Julia seemed relieved by my progress, encouraging me to socialize more. My mother even gently suggested it might be time to consider dating again, an idea I immediately rejected. The business continued to thrive under my renewed focus. We expanded internationally, necessitating more travel. It was one such business trip, almost 2 years after Amanda's death, that brought me to Seattle for a major industry conference. I had no idea this routine trip would unravel everything I thought I knew about my life and the people in it. The Seattle airport was crowded that Friday afternoon. I was at Gate C-36, waiting for my delayed flight back to Boston, half listening to a podcast while reviewing meeting notes. When I glanced up to check the departure board, my heart stopped. Across the terminal, approximately 50 yards away, a woman was walking briskly toward the international departures area. She wore a dark blue raincoat and carried a black leather backpack. Her hair was shorter, lighter in color, but the profile, the distinctive walk, the way she gestured while speaking on her phone, was unmistakable. It was Amanda. My body moved before my brain could process what was happening. I abandoned my luggage, knocked over my coffee, and sprinted across the terminal, dodging irritated travelers. I kept my eyes locked on her moving figure, afraid she would disappear if I blinked. She turned briefly, scanning the crowd in that habitual way she always had, and I saw her face clearly. The shock nearly brought me to my knees. When she saw me, her expression transformed from casual distraction to pure terror. Our eyes locked for 3 eternal seconds. She knew me. I knew her. This was no doppelganger, no trick of grief. My dead wife was very much alive. She ran, ducking into a restroom, then emerging without the raincoat hair tucked under a baseball cap. The disguise was amateur, but effective enough in the crowded airport. I lost her near the security checkpoint for international departures, an area I could not access without a boarding pass. I stood there trembling, questioning my sanity as airport security asked if I needed medical assistance. Back in my hotel room, I paced for hours, alternately convinced I was having a psychotic break and certain of what I had seen. I called my therapist, who suggested grief can cause vivid hallucinations, especially around significant dates. It was close to the 2-year anniversary of her death. I almost convinced myself. Almost. The next morning, instead of flying home, I visited a private investigator named Scott Hamilton, whose firm handled corporate espionage cases for my company. I told him everything, expecting skepticism. Instead, he asked methodical, practical questions and took the case immediately. 2 weeks later, I sat in Scott's cluttered office staring at surveillance photos spread across his desk. Amanda, now calling herself Allison Davis, was living in Portland, working at a small mental health nonprofit. She had an apartment in the Southeast District, a cat, and apparently a new boyfriend. She looked happy. Scott pushed forward documents revealing more unthinkable truths. The death certificate had been altered by someone with access to county systems. The funeral home that supposedly cremated her body had records that did not quite match up under close scrutiny. Most damning of all, financial records showed large transfers from my parents' accounts to a series of offshore entities that eventually connected to Amanda's new identity. My family had helped fake my wife's death. They had helped her escape me. More evidence filled in the horrifying puzzle. Email exchanges between my sister Julia and Amanda dating back 3 years, discussing what they referred to as an exit strategy. Phone records showing my mother in Maine, the week of the supposed accident. A second apartment my sister had maintained in Philadelphia, where Amanda apparently lived during the first 6 months after her disappearance. Most painful were the photographs of family gatherings where Amanda was present. A Christmas dinner at my parents' vacation home in Vermont, my sister's birthday celebration at a restaurant in Chicago. While I grieved alone in our Boston home, they continued relationships with my wife, maintaining an elaborate deception that excluded only me. One photograph destroyed me completely. Amanda, my parents, and my sister arms around each other, smiling on a beach that I recognized as my father's favorite spot in North Carolina. It was dated 3 months after her funeral. While I was attending grief counseling, they were having a family vacation with my supposedly dead wife. I confronted them on Thanksgiving. Looking back, it was a decision driven by raw pain and betrayal, not strategy. I had always spent the holiday at my parents' house, a tradition Amanda and I maintained throughout our marriage. That year I arrived early, setting up Scott's laptop to display the evidence in the formal dining room before anyone else arrived. My mother entered first, calling my name cheerfully, as she came through the front door with grocery bags. Her smile froze when she saw the images displayed on the large screen. My father and Julia arrived minutes later, finding my mother sitting silently across from me, her face ashen. No one spoke until everyone was seated. The beautiful table set with my grandmother's china and my mother's polished silver became a courtroom. My father tried denial first. The photos were manipulated. I was having a breakdown. They were concerned about my mental health. His normally commanding voice quivered slightly. Julia went with anger, attacking me for hiring someone to spy on the family. How dare I violate their privacy? What kind of person does that? Her righteous indignation might have been convincing if her eyes had not kept darting to the exit. My mother simply cried, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. I remained silent, clicking through the evidence methodically. The money transfers, the emails, the second apartment lease in my sister's name, the altered death certificate. With each new slide, their defenses visibly crumbled. Finally, my father sighed heavily and asked Julia and my mother to leave the room. They refused. We would face this. As a family, my mother insisted, her voice stronger than I expected. What followed was a 3-hour conversation that rewrote my understanding of my marriage, my family, and myself. They told me a story I could barely comprehend, a perspective of my life I had never considered. According to them, my relationship with Amanda had grown increasingly controlling over our 5 years.